Unit 2, Community Participation and Compliance, the community's role and responsibilities. When a community participates in NFIP, it takes on significant legal and administrative responsibilities. The community must designate a floodplain administrator who becomes the point person for all NFIP-related activities. This person does not have to be a full-time position, but they must understand the program requirements and have the authority to enforce the Floodplain Management Ordinance. The floodplain administrator's duties are extensive. They must review all development proposals in flood-prone areas to ensure compliance with local ordinances and NFIP standards. They issue permits for development in the special flood hazard area, conduct site inspections during construction, maintain records of all floodplain development, and provide information to property owners about flood risks and insurance requirements. Communities must adopt and enforce a floodplain management ordinance that meets NFIP minimum requirements. This ordinance must regulate all development in the SFHA, require permits for development activities, ensure that new construction meets elevation requirements, and establish procedures for reviewing substantial improvements and substantial damage situations. The permit system. The permit system is the primary tool communities use to ensure NFIP compliance. Any development in the SFHA requires a permit, and development is defined very broadly. It includes construction of buildings, placement of manufactured homes, mining, dredging, filling, grading, paving, drilling operations, and storage of equipment or materials. The permit process typically begins when a property owner or contractor applies for permission to develop in the SFHA. The floodplain administrator reviews the application to ensure the proposed development meets all requirements. This includes verifying that the lowest floor will be at or above the base flood elevation, that flood-resistant materials will be used below the BFE, and that utilities will be properly protected. During construction, the floodplain administrator must conduct inspections at critical stages. For new buildings, inspections are typically required at the foundation stage to verify proper elevation, during construction to ensure compliance with design requirements, and at completion before issuing a certificate of occupancy, elevation certificates and documentation. Elevation certificates are one of the most important tools in floodplain management. These are official documents that show the elevation of a building relative to the base flood elevation. They are required for new construction and substantial improvements in the SFHA, and they are essential for determining proper flood insurance rates. The elevation certificate must be completed by a licensed surveyor or engineer and must be accurate to within 1 foot. The certificate shows various elevation measurements, including the lowest floor elevation, the highest adjacent grade elevation, and the lowest adjacent grade elevation. These measurements determine whether the building meets NFIP requirements and what flood insurance rates apply. Communities must maintain detailed records of all floodplain development activities. This includes permit applications, approved plans, inspection reports, elevation certificates, and any correspondence related to violations or enforcement actions. These records are crucial for demonstrating compliance during FEMA's community assistance visits and for defending decisions if they are challenged in court. Substantial improvement and substantial damage. The substantial improvement and substantial damage rules are among the most complex aspects of NFIP compliance. When the cost of improvements to an existing building equals or exceeds 50% of the building's market value before the improvements, the entire building must be brought into compliance with current floodplain management requirements. Market value for this determination is the value before any improvements begin, and it should reflect what the building would sell for in its pre-improvement condition. This is not the assessed value for tax purposes, which may be lower than market value. The improvement cost includes all costs associated with the work, including labor, materials, and equipment, but excludes the cost of plans, permits, and site improvements like driveways or landscaping. The substantial improvement rule applies cumulatively over a rolling 5-year period. This means that if a property owner does $30,000 worth of improvements 1 year and $25,000 worth of improvements 3 years later, and the building's market value is $100,000, The total improvements equal 55% of the market value and trigger the substantial improvement requirements. Substantial damage occurs when the cost to restore a building to its pre-damage condition equals or exceeds 50% of the building's market value before the damage occurred. This triggers the same requirements as substantial improvement, meaning the building must be brought into compliance with current standards during the restoration process. Compliance monitoring and assistance. FEMA monitors community compliance through several mechanisms. The Community Assistance Visit, or CAV, is a comprehensive review of a community's floodplain management program. During a CAV, FEMA representatives review the community's ordnance, examine permit files and elevation certificates, conduct field inspections of development in the SFHA, and interview local officials about their implementation of the program. The Community Assistance Contact, or CAC, is a less formal interaction between FEMA and community officials. CACs might occur in response to specific questions or concerns, or they might be routine check-ins to provide technical assistance. FEMA also receives complaints about potential violations from insurance companies, property owners, and other sources. When FEMA receives a complaint, they contact the community to investigate and may conduct a special CAV if necessary. Communities can request technical assistance from FEMA at any time. This assistance might involve help with interpreting regulations, reviewing ordnance language, or resolving complex permitting situations. FEMA's regional offices maintain staff specifically to provide this assistance, enforcement actions and consequences. When communities fail to meet their NFIP obligations, FEMA can take progressively serious enforcement actions. The first step is usually increased monitoring and technical assistance to help the community come into compliance voluntarily. If problems persist, FEMA may place the community on probation. Probation is a formal notice that the community has 90 days to correct identified deficiencies or face suspension from the program. During probation, new flood insurance policies are available, but rates include a $50 surcharge. Suspension is the most serious enforcement action, short of complete withdrawal from NFIP. When a community is suspended, no new flood insurance policies can be written, existing policies cannot be renewed, and no claims will be paid for damage occurring after the suspension date. Suspension also makes the community ineligible for federal disaster assistance and other federal programs. Withdrawal from NFIP is extremely rare and occurs only when a community formally requests to leave the program or persistently refuses to comply with program requirements, despite repeated enforcement actions. Withdrawal has the same immediate effects as suspension, but is permanent unless the community reapplies and is accepted back into the program. The consequences of enforcement actions extend far beyond insurance availability. Suspended or withdrawn communities cannot receive federal disaster assistance. Their residents cannot get federally backed mortgages for properties in the SFHA, and the community becomes ineligible for many federal grants and programs. These consequences create strong incentives for communities to maintain compliance.